Welcome, everybody, to Inclusion Starts Now, the podcast. I am really just going to get straight into this episode. We did end up talking for a long time, and I just feel like it is so important. The information is so important. So, this is Mer. We are going to talk about preparing for emergency evacuations or situations. So, enjoy. So, Mer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mare, and I am a woman who's disabled, and I'm also a caregiver of some individuals with disability. And oh boy, now I'm like, what do I say about myself?
What I should say is how we got connected was through a mutual friend, Wes, and he connected me to you because he said that you were really good at like preparing for emergencies. And
Okay.
as the LA fires are going on right now, and what we are seeing in the news is that disabled people are dying because the systems are failing them. So how can we be prepared is really it. Like why are you the person with all the best information?
So, my name is Mare, and I am disabled, and I'm a caregiver, so I'm adjacent to other people with disability in my life. And I am the daughter of two retired first responders, brilliant,
Ooh,
brilliant mind first responders. And I grew up in a household that was really passionate about um, being prepared and taking care of the community and always having a plan, right? You've always got to be ready for what's coming next. Brilliant, brilliant thinkers. My parents have incredible minds when it comes to community preparedness, disaster preparedness, mutual aid. Um, but having the perspective of being disabled, which is an identity that has always been in my life, but I was not really aware of it until much later on in my 20s,
hmm.
and not really embracing that identity. And now being adjacent to other people with disability, I I have this interesting perspective of gaps where I've seen some brilliance in the first responder world and the preparedness world, but I can now see these little cracks that people are slipping through. And with everything that's going on in our world right now, it just gets my brain going. One, because I do still share that passion that my parents have of helping people. It was never a career field that I went into because ultimately I wasn't really able-bodied enough to do it. But it's something that's always been there. And now living through what our world is, which is changing every day,
Yeah.
I'm constantly having to remind myself that I too have to be mindful of this gap and find where we fit in it.
Yeah. Well, that is amazing that you have grown up with like that history or that background of having two parents who, I mean, we're constantly prepared for a situation like that. So what would you say are like the best tips that they've given you that you feel like more people need to know?
So, my dad is a really big fan of like Franklin Covey and all of the um, what are those, like the 5 steps to being like super organized. I don't know. When my dad became an executive in the fire world, so he was an assistant chief, he went off and was educated at the National Fire Academy and had all these leadership classes. And he was always trying to find ways to like apply this to the community. It wasn't for him. And so one thing that really stuck with him was that if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. And that was something that he tried really hard to instill in us as kids, as well as his community. So, for those of us who are sitting here looking at what's going on in the world right now and we're just overwhelmed, that's okay. It's okay to be overwhelmed, but that overwhelm that we have in the doom scrolling and all this like information saturation that we're getting, and I'm using we as like, it might be you, it might not be you, but
I mean, I know it's me.
it's me too. It's me too. It causes paralysis. So I know a lot of people can identify with the feeling of scrolling online and you're just looking at traumas and horror and devastation and then a puppy. And then it's back to like, it's this up and down, very strange roller coaster where you just feel oversaturated. And suddenly you're preparing for the apocalypse, right? Like the apocalypse is going to happen. Your brain is kind of in a place that's not where you are right now, like where your feet are. You're where social media is taking you. So we're overwhelmed with information. We are in a state of paralysis because there's so much coming at us. And I think a lot of people can resonate with perfectionism, right?
Hmm.
We want to do it right. We want to be perfect. And I think that perfectionism is not always this like it absolutely has to be perfect, but it's I have to do my 120% best or else I can't do it.
Yeah.
Right? So like
Well, I feel like a lot of educators would agree, and parents. I feel like a lot of people feel that. Yeah.
yeah, where like it has to be, even though I know I'm not perfect, I get caught in this perfectionism where I'm like, it has to be the perfect plan or it's not worth it. So those three things right there alone are probably the most dangerous things in our world right now, keeping us from being prepared.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's shocking to the listener. I don't know. It might be, it might not. It's a lot. I think even just those three things right there are a lot to take in, right? So we're getting a lot of information. We're having some paralysis. You know, we are trying to create this perfect plan. So my dad always liked to say, do something even if it's wrong. And that didn't mean go hurt someone. That meant as long as you are taking even the babyest step in the right direction, you are doing something and
Yeah.
you are making a difference. And, you know, he would talk about these stories of, so he did something called urban search and rescue, which is like people who are trapped in trenches and having to like psychologically talk through people who are in horrible situations that could potentially be dead before they're even saved, giving them some sort of hope in the moment, right? So do something even if it's wrong. Drink this bottle of water that I'm going to set on this tube. You know, crack a glow stick, like people who are stuck somewhere dark, think like a mine cavern or something. Crack this glow stick, look at it. What do you think? Like, isn't it bright? Do something, even if it's wrong and it's not getting you to the final destination. Um, there's just so many things that are coming at us right now. When I think about even just a few minutes ago, scrolling mindlessly on the internet, which I'm trying not to do as
Hmm.
much, but it's like political, it's climate change, it's um, homeless. There's just so many
Yeah.
things that are coming at us, and we can't do it all. We can't.
Yeah.
And I think that that fear is what's going to keep most people from doing anything. Um,
I mean,
no,
I
I
can
don't.
say the paralysis alone is very much how I have felt the last couple days of just like this numb feeling of, because yeah, I've been scrolling. I mean, a lot of my friends and family, I mean, most of them live in Orange County and not so much LA, but I mean, Southern California is where I grew up. I know so many people there, and I have started hearing people I know who have lost their houses and just, yeah, seeing the political stuff, the insurance stuff, like, and I can't stop. I mean, I just feel like I'm sitting there and I'm rewatching like the same videos of where they're just driving by showing houses and it has been really, I mean, I've had to like not turn off my phone. That's crazy. Get off the app and I will have to like put it somewhere else and like
Mhm.
walk away because I'm just like, maybe I'll have like my watch on. So if someone texts me, I could be like, somewhat available. But other than that, I know it's hard not to just keep watching it and getting constant updates and seeing all this information.
And I think that we forget that our brains are processing this information and it's almost like we're there, right? So 100 years ago, they didn't have TikTok, they didn't have live feed, they couldn't see this stuff the way that we're seeing it. And our
Hmm.
brains are perceiving it like the danger is here. And perhaps you're not in a place where the fires are, but your brain is kind of getting you there. And it's tricky. So what can we do, right?
Yes.
You're familiar, I'm sure, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I would describe it for listeners, but I feel like you're going to describe it a lot better. I'm going to butcher it up.
I'm gonna butcher it up too. I'm just gonna pull it up on my screen so that I get it
Okay.
100% here because um yeah, I
People
will
do
admit that
compare it to
go ahead.
inclusive practices, because it's like saying what are like our most basic needs that like we actually need, and it like goes up
Yeah. So
again, poorly
Maslow's hierarchy
described,
of
but
needs is a
ready.
pyramid, and you can't build the top of the pyramid without the bottom of the pyramid, right? So we're talking about building up layers and bases, and it starts with your physiological needs, your safety, and then the top, like the goal that many people will say is like self-actualization, right? Or feeling that you are who you are supposed to be. If on the lines of perfectionism, if we decided that self-actualization was the goal and only our physiological needs were being met, it would be impossible to get there if that was the goal, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many steps in between: safety, loving and belonging, esteem. You can't just like take one big step and get there.
Yeah.
So preparing for a disaster is a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when we put this crown, this big lofty goal of we're gonna be prepared on our heads, we're gonna get nowhere, absolutely
Yeah.
nowhere. Because it's like not even a smart goal, right? It's not measurable. It's not attainable. It's something where we're just like putting words out into the world. And sometimes it's great to put words out in the world, but when it comes to things that we actually have to like take steps towards, just throwing out that doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
So what I would say, like the base of preparedness for, our hierarchy of needs for getting ready for a disaster or anything that could happen is getting out of your house. Okay. So I was thinking about this last night. And for me, I don't leave my house as much as most able-bodied people do. There's just too many things in my life. But I do leave my house. And lately, I've been practicing getting out of my house a little bit more. So the very base of preparing for an emergency is really, what would it look like if you had to leave your house for 2 hours? Someone knocks on your door and they say, you have to come with me. Let's say it's a trusted friend. They knock on the door, you have to come with me for 2 hours. What do you need? What do you need for 2 hours? For me, I'm going to need some medications. I'm going to need some water, probably my compression socks, my ID, my phone, make sure the dogs are okay, and go and come back. What does that then look like if you have to leave with your kids for 2 hours or your entire family or bringing the dogs? And then when you think about that 2 hour segment, what does it look like if you have to go for a day? Okay, so like breaking down these evacuations or the thought of having to pick up things and go into smaller chunks and making it more feasible to digest. Because if we're just I feel it's so easy for me to just jump into like, I have to be prepared for a disaster. I have to have 72 hours worth of water and food, and I have to be able to flee my house. But what if I can't even make it that 72 hours?
Yeah.
Right? I know that's a really morbid thing to say out loud, but you can't make it to 72 hours for that water if you can't prepare to leave your house for 2 hours.
Yeah.
There's some really tragic news coming out of a gentleman. We should probably figure out his name. I don't have it written down, but I saw from NBC that he died in the fires in Los Angeles because he himself could have evacuated, but his adult child son had cerebral palsy and he stayed behind and the ambulance didn't make it in time. And
I did hear that story.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I speak from a place of privilege, right? I think we all have our own privileges that we have to be aware of. But I can leave my house for a couple of hours. And it just makes me wonder, did they have a plan for how to leave the house for a couple of hours? Because even leaving the home for 2 hours could have saved a life,
Yeah.
right? There's always a way to make a plan once you are safe.
Yeah.
I know that sounds really scary, and I know it sounds impossible for some people, but morbidly, if you're dead, there's nothing more we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a really good, I'm all about mindsets, as that is like pretty much where we start to make change, is like understanding why we think the way that we're thinking. And I feel like that's a really good way to like take your first step is to think, yeah, if someone were to come over and be like, hey, let's go out for 2 hours, like I think that it gets you to start thinking of like, okay, what are those basic needs that I know I need to get out of the house for 2 hours? Um,
And
because yeah, I mean, I think that's a great first step.
I think a lot of people would be surprised too when they really chunk it down as to how much more prepared they are when they're in that like rational brain, right?
Hmm.
So, um, what does your child need to be gone? If you have a disabled child, what does your disabled child need to be gone for 8 hours a day? Well, if your disabled child attends school, they do leave the house if they are going to an in-school person in school I'm sorry, in person school, they do leave the house for 8 hours a day. And lately I've been looking at my youngest backpack when we're packing it, and we're putting all, a few medical supplies that he needs in it and some masks and putting it together. And I don't take it apart at the end of the day. I'm
Yeah.
always putting things back into it and restocking it for the next day. But when I look at it, I'm like, okay, so I know at school he's getting snacks. I know that there are things that like I don't have in his bag, but like there are medical supplies and masks and a change of clothing. Like there's a little
Yeah.
bag right here where if I had to leave the house for 8 hours, like we can go find a snack somewhere.
Yeah.
We have that privilege where we can go find a snack. Um, Drinking from an open cup is a little bit more challenging, but we could find a way to get hydrated, right? We might be able to find a Starbucks that has a straw, or doing a few different things that help us along the way. But that mindset of like, I have a bag with a few things in it kind of like lifts the weight,
Yeah.
right? A little bit. And it helps me reset and realize that like I have to just keep moving forward in my planning. I can't jump ahead.
Yeah. I had a student I was his one-on-one aide, and his mom had basically two bags for him. And one of them was like his school backpack, and then one was his, like, it was like always in the car backpack.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it was, basic medical need supplies that he needed, a change of clothes, because he had like a G tube. So it was certain things like that that just were always there.
Hmm.
And I have friends today that have children with some of the same needs. And like I had a friend who her kid pulled out their G tube and they couldn't find their other one. They were looking all over the place, like all over their house. And I was like, that's just not in a backpack. Like, shouldn't you, like that should be in like the school backpack, right? What if she pulled it out at school? And but to me, I was like, I had someone who showed me
Yeah.
like how to always have those certain emergency supplies like readily available. And because yeah, I mean, if you're the G tube very rarely falls out, it's kind of annoying to bring it everywhere, but that one time you're gonna need it, that or that emergency evacuation, it's pretty darn helpful.
And I think we easily forget to give ourselves credit as individuals who are adjacent to disability and perhaps disabled themselves. A lot of us have to have that extra step even in normal days, right? Like what if the G
Yeah.
tube comes out, or if you have a trach, you have to bring the supplies because you can't lose your airway. So there is a little, even though the playing field is still not level, like it's not equitable, let's be real, but there is a little bit of a boost that you might not be giving yourself of like, I can do this because just leaving the house, if you're disabled, generally has a little bit more planning than an able-bodied individual who decides they want to go get a coffee, grabs their phone, grabs their keys, grabs the wallet, walks out and goes.
Yeah.
Right? For me, it's like, do I have the parking placard? Did I drink enough water? Compression socks? Am I gonna slip? Like, there's
Yeah.
just so many things. And so there's two ways that your mind can go with that. One is like, I have all these extra things that I have to do. It's overwhelming. Yes. But also, I have all these extra things that I have to do and I do them. Doing it.
Yeah.
So in my mind, like right now, I'm thinking how many, so I've got the school bag, right? I have some stuff in my car. When I really started thinking about it last night, I was like, if we had to go, like we're good. We're good to go. Now, how long before we need supplies? I don't know. It could be a day. I think really like if all we had to live out of was just what's in our bags right now, I think we would live comfortably for a day. I think we would live okay for a couple of days. Um, but it's not because we have everything that we need. It's because we just kind of have to keep being agile with the plans. So people in LA, if they didn't have a plan, they just left, right?
Yeah.
So no matter what, maybe if you had a plan and maybe if you didn't have a plan, you're probably still meeting up at a Target or a Walmart to pick up a couple of things, which privileged to have the money to be able to do that or the credit or whatever it takes, but you're probably not having everything. And a lot of people think that they have to have everything ready.
Yeah.
Um, so that ability to just kind of chunk it out and then start getting more comfortable. So we know like if I go to my parents' house, there are some supplies that we need there. And my parents live far enough away where if for some reason we had to evacuate, we might be out of our danger area and have some supplies to hold us over. So having a network is helpful. Once again, that's kind of a privileged thing, but that can help you get to kind of your next step. So I have like step one of how to get us out of the house safely. And then I can start working on my step two of where am I going? What am I going to need? Because if I don't have step one, I might not make it to step two.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too, um, to think about how when you're preparing for a disaster or an emergency or anything that could be happening right now, like it could be anything, right? We get into that paralysis of like it's going to be everything. It's going to be the apocalypse. Prepare for Tuesday. Don't
Yeah.
prepare for the apocalypse. Prepare for Tuesday. So, if for some reason Tuesday happens and you have to change your plans a little bit, you just kind of go on with it and being able to keep your things that you're doing to prepare as just part of your daily life, like making sure for me, I fill pill boxes for myself. But all the medications that go in the pill boxes are in like little plastic, almost like dollar store containers, like you can get them really
Yeah.
cheap. So if I had to like pick them up and put them in something to go, like they're in a cupboard. That's just part of my routine. So I have my boxes, but if I really needed my 30-day or 60-day supplies, I can just grab them and go. Um, and it is a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
But when you kind of start manipulating your daily life to think about how like maybe I'm going to go on vacation someday. It doesn't have to be a doomsday thing, right? Going on vacation and going having a disaster at its logical core sometimes for our family is very similar, right? Like what
Yeah.
medical supplies do we need? How do we fit them in a bag? How do we
How do
have
we
enough?
live outside of our house for X amount of time?
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
don't vacation a lot because for a while that was something that was just really exhausting for me to figure out. But then when I started kind of making that connection that like, okay, so we remove the emotional element. This is just a logical like, how do we get out of the house? And then it becomes those modular things, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It kind of helped me start to reshape how I just function in the home daily. Um, and I think that's kind of looking forward as best as I can with what's going on in our world and how much it's changing. I think that small changes at home is really just where it's at
Yeah.
because every day something's changing.
So
Have
I
you feel the same way?
Yeah, so I was gonna I've recently seen some it was like a reel and it was actually about like organizing the house, like a cleaning video, but it talked about how they store all of their medical supplies for their children, and they talked about how many they have of each thing and where they put everything. And so it's like the things that they need daily go into this bag, that's only the bag for this. Like like, and I kind of related it to like our diaper bag. I have two small kids, they're 4 and 2. And so we have a diaper bag that just always has the stuff in it. I mean, there's always snacks, there's always diapers, there's always wipes. Like there's always the things that I know that if like because sometimes we don't know. It's like I feel like we're out and then they want to go do something else and I'm like, okay, well, do we have food? Do we have water? Do we have a diaper? If you go to the bathroom, like we are constantly preparing. So I did end up getting a bag that is only the diaper bag. That in when I bought it, I was like, oh, it's a cute backpack and I'll wear it and I'll take the diapers out. I'll keep changing it. I'm like, no, that is not the life when you are like also in charge of all these other moving parts. It's like if I can have one less moving part, it's going to be this cute diaper bag and it will forever be the diaper bag. And, after we have snacks, I take out the pouch and the pouch comes inside with me. I fill it back up and it goes right back into the diaper bag. So it's just like one less thing I have to deal with or even think of. But that was what this person did with like their cleaning video because there was something it was like an expensive medical machine, and I can't remember what it was used for, but they keep it in the same place all the time. And it's like, I want to say kind of like the mudroom area or like the closet downstairs, because that was where they use it. But if there was an emergency, they had like an emergency section in their closet that was like, these are the things you need to grab and go. And I
Mhm.
thought that that was a really good tip because we kind of had a backpack that was like an emergency backpack, and I don't know. I feel like it's now all expired, and we have to like get a new one and
That's the hard thing
do
is
that
that
too.
when you plan something and you make it, it doesn't always like batteries need to be replaced, things get expired, things dry out, band-aids aren't sticky anymore.
Yes.
That's an easy thing to get overwhelmed with. I felt that
Yes.
because we moved in the past year, and when we were opening up our emergency stuff in the new house, and I was looking at it, I was like, oh God, it's all expired. Everything's expired.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of realized too that like when things are static and you just forget about them and they're not part of your daily life, like
Yeah.
it's easy to not rotate through them.
Well, like
But
how often would you say that you would need to rotate? Because like I have a really bad habit of like the first aid kit where I'm like, well, it's not that bad. We're just going to use this wipe. Like I'll keep not using it because I'm saving it for when I'm really going to need it. And then I really need it and I'm like, oh, everything's dry. Let's go
we,
home.
my husband and I, we really struggle with this. And we both have that like scarcity mindset. And I'm not sure, I know where it comes from for him, but I'm not really sure where it comes from me.
Yeah.
But I'm always like, oh my gosh, I have to save this. But I, I think I've switched more towards this attitude of like, the new thing goes in the it's kind of like those organizing videos on TikTok that are addicting to watch, right?
I
Like
love
the
those
new
so
thing
much.
goes in the back and the old things comes forward, and using like when someone says drink the good wine, don't save it for a special occasion,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of what I'm saying in my mind when I'm like, okay, put the old wipes in the back, or put the new wipes in the back, bring the old ones as far forward as you can. Use the stuff while you have it. But I think that's partially because of our shift that we had when we moved and we realized how much stuff we wasted. In my mind, I was
Yeah.
thinking, gosh. But the diaper bag, back to that diaper bag thing. So when our youngest was able to start having his own bag, we just we bought we had some gift cards to Nordstrom and we bought one of those really cute Kanken backpacks, like the little,
Yeah.
Swedish backpacks, and we started putting his stuff in there because he wanted to carry his own things. And I think that with young children, it's really good for them to have some independence and to be involved. And I know that with the individuals with disabilities, it's really important for them to have autonomy, independence, and be a part of this too, right? So, anyone that you're thinking of preparing for that you are kind of like responsible for in the greater, herd of your family, whatever, whoever it is you're responsible for, if they can take steps in kind of preparing and having this be a part of their daily life too, it's great. So we don't have like a big bag anymore like we used to. We had a diaper bag. We transitioned it to this Kanken backpack, and everything that he needs goes in there. And there's snacks, and we use those. They're not like watertight, but they're those like zipper, like vinyl bags.
Yeah.
And so one of them's full of snacks, and one's got medical supplies. And we can't do latex in our house. So, the latex-free Band-Aids, the latex-free gloves, like everything's in there. And I just keep reminding myself that like we have to use it. So if I'm in the kitchen and the backpack is downstairs with me and I need a Band-Aid, I might just go over and get one. And then a few minutes later, like go replace it, right?
Yeah.
I just try to keep the stuff where we're using it, um, and that kind of keeps the supply going. But I will say, and obviously this is just my own what I do. It's not it's not advice, um, but I'm not like terribly horrified of expiration dates for things that aren't like an EpiPen. Yes, I'm horrified of that, but like Advil,
Yeah.
um, um, an ointment or something like that, as long as it still to me looks like it's safe, like it's the right color, it's the right consistency, it's not terribly old, we'll still use it. I have a neomycin allergy, so Neosporin, like that triple
Oh,
antibiotic ointment. I'm allergic to like the Neosporin, the neomycin in it,
yeah.
and I have like a very specific or not triple, but a very specific single antibiotic that I get from my PCP as a cream, like in case I have something, I try not to use it. I think we overuse that. But when I was a kid, we would put it on everything, and then as an adult, I put it on and I like, but
Yeah.
um, I have a couple that are expired, but if there was an emergency and I needed it, I think it's probably better than nothing.
Yeah. I would
And
think so.
pharmaceuticals are really tricky, and I feel like there could be a whole podcast episode on pharmaceuticals and DME because it's really hard to get
What's
what you need.
DME?
Durable medical equipment.
Oh,
So,
okay.
if kids have like wheelchairs, or if you've got oxygen, or even like bandages, some bandages or wound care is considered durable medical equipment. It's really hard to get what you need from your insurance company, not your
Yeah.
provider, your insurance company,
Yep.
let alone extra. But I will say I have a little tip for if you have some commonly used medications that are prescription. Um, Cost Plus Pharmacy, it's a website. I'll have to send you the link. They will do so like it's one of the Shark Tank people. I think his name is Mark Rubin.
Yeah.
He made this website where you can get really cheap prescriptions. Like you still have to have your doctor write in the order. They mail it to you, but like it's cheaper than GoodRx, right? You don't use your insurance. You can get stuff really cheap. And if you're nervous about not having enough for fear that a disaster is happening, and you can talk to your provider and trust them, and they can send over a 10-day prescription of something that GoodRx or not GoodRx, that if they can send over something that
Cost
Cost Plus
plus.
Drugs has, it might only be a couple of bucks for them to send you a $10 or a 10-day supply so that you
Yeah.
can have something and feel a little bit more safe, because it's really hard when
Yeah.
you take medications daily, to have extra.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, and I really liked your example. I mean, at the very beginning when you talked about like the bin
Mhm.
where like that's not like it's something that you use every day, but if you had to like evacuate, you could just grab the bin and go, which I think is really good, like to have the extras in there. I mean, I definitely know I have hoarded some medication that I'm just like, well, if I take that again,
Mhm.
um, because yeah, I'm like, I don't want to just like get rid of it, but I guess this is where I falter on that line of am I hoarding or am I being prepared?
And that's really a very gray line.
Yeah.
And I would say that from my own, I think I was hoarding. In my previous house, I was hoarding. Um, my previous house, I was like an absolute, I couldn't keep my, like, executive functioning was gone. Um, there were too many
Yeah.
things going on. I was just like hoarding and not preparing, right? And I think that for me, knowing about whether I'm hoarding or whether I'm preparing is it functional? Can I use it?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, hoarding something is not functional, right? Whereas being prepared
Yeah.
is functional. And in a way, I guess we were kind of climate refugees when we moved, um, on a very, very light level. Like I'm not comparing myself to these huge climate crises, but we only moved a couple miles from our old house. It really was not a good house for our family, but the tipping points for us were that it didn't have air conditioning. So we live in Michigan. We didn't need air conditioning because we would be working during the day, and the summers were not that hot when we bought the house.
Yeah.
And then 2020, I started staying home, and it was just getting hotter and hotter. We didn't have air conditioning. We had a lot of trees, and we were having problems with trees falling on our house. Like we lived
Uh,
in a little mini forest in a
yeah.
city, and the trees were falling on our house. We lost our power probably 10 to 20 times a year,
Oh my gosh.
anywhere between like 20 minutes and 10 days at a time.
Wow.
And yeah, it became too much. Like the weather. So we had an ice storm, dropped a tree on our house, lost power, couldn't even get outside to do the generator because there was just so much ice. Like
Oh my
the
gosh.
ground was just awful.
Yeah.
So we finally reached a breaking point last year and we moved and we've got air conditioning now and we don't have trees. I love trees, but we have one tree in our yard.
Yeah.
But I was trying so hard to get ahead and I could not get ahead with preparing because one, like disaster was hitting us every, if our power went out 20 times in a year, which it did one year, that's like a couple times a month, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes like in the summer, we couldn't even stay there because it was so hot when the power went out. So you're not even there, you can't prepare. So we did end up having to move, but now I feel like my situation is a little bit more clear. So there I was hoarding and I was scrambling and I wasn't really, I think I needed help, right? But
Yeah.
who do you ask for help with this stuff? It's really hard.
Yeah.
It has to be someone that you trust and it has to be somebody that understands, which is kind of why I think I want to start Ready, Set, Disabled because
Yeah.
there's not a lot of good resources out here about this. And the resources that used to be here are disappearing. They're not funded as much as they used to be. Um, but just keeping things functional is how I can keep myself sanely saying, like, I'm not hoarding. I know I can use this stuff. And if you had asked me like 3 years ago if I would be able to like rotate through supplies and keep track of everything, I would have been like, no, nope, no.
Yeah.
But I'll say that like we got here by just trying to live, not by trying to prepare.
Yeah. Well, I think that is also a really big topic that comes up a lot in the disabled community of like having a hard time connecting with people and growing that network, especially when parents are, spending all day either trying to work and then juggling, fighting insurance companies and going
Mhm.
through those extra steps of like leaving the house on a day-to-day basis. Like I do feel like a lot of parents struggle and then trying to also find their people that they can like connect with. Um, and just like kind of, I guess, understand where they're coming from a little bit more or have that safe space to communicate, which I feel like has been really challenging for a lot of the families that I talk to. I do know that they struggle connecting with other people, but I think that is just something that's like really important. And it kind of sucks that it gets put on them a lot, but there are just a lot of people who don't know much about disabilities. And so it's like, I mean, that's why I kind of try to take it upon myself and educate people as much as I can from just the information that I have. But I do feel like that's a really big problem, um, not having a community. Do you have any tips on
Ooh.
that?
Well, so first, I'll give the advice that everyone always gives. That's you're going to tell me it's garbage, but well, not you, but the listeners will be like it's garbage, but it's true. You have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people. 3 years ago, I would have told you that's garbage and thrown my drink at you. Um, but find a hobby, find something that nurtures you. I just got back into crocheting. You have to keep
Yeah.
yourself sane, right? Even if it's like locking the door for 10 minutes and taking a deep breath and like grounding yourself. Because the world is chaos. The world is chaos. Everything. I remember there was like a point when I was crying with my therapist, telling her that like I would pivot in life things would stabilize. They wouldn't get great, they'd just stabilize. And as soon as it was stable, pivoting again, right? Like we're just constantly moving. Um, so finding some way to like be okay. And that, once again, not perfect, right? Just a little bit more okay than you are right now. If it's crocheting, closing the door for a few minutes, taking a deep breath. But finding connection is very hard for those who are disabled and also those who are adjacent to disability. So, first and foremost, if you have family or people that you are safely able to be close to, emotionally safe, physically safe, um, keeping in contact with them is really important, and knowing how to ask for help is really hard. It's something that I'm
Yeah.
still learning. But even like part of my own preparedness has been asking my parents, like, if we have to leave, can we come to your house? Or if for some reason we need a hotel room, can you help us pay for one? Um, but having family or having someone who's your chosen family that's physically close to you is really helpful. But when it comes to the connection for people who might not, your family might not get what you're going through, like they can get it, but they can't really get it. Online community is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a dumpster fire at times, but online community is absolutely amazing. When I when my son was born disabled, we hadn't really connected with our own disability identities at that point.
Yeah.
I still really wasn't sure what was wrong with me. I just thought that I was lazy. I couldn't do what other people could do. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have a whole bunch of things that was preventing me from like doing the things. And the first community that I joined was one for parents of children with my son's disability. And it was a dumpster fire because there's a lot of ableism. There's a lot of um, there's literally like the medical mom crew that's like the identity of their child is, or the identity of themselves is their child's disability. So it is a little overwhelming to walk into some of those groups, but like with anything, the more that you look around and the further that you keep going, as long as you keep an open mind,
Hmm.
I kept finding more and more support groups. And if there were certain people that I really enjoyed their perspective, I would make sure to comment on their stuff. There's a woman who, she used to live in California. She lives in Minnesota now, and we talk like 4 times a day. We've never met in person. Our kids have the same disability, and she's my person. you
Yeah.
know, it, it doesn't substitute having that like in-person um, physical help. Like we don't have a lot of that. We really don't have this village that some people have. But she was so helpful and instrumental in like helping me realize that I needed to move, or like I needed to do something, or like, hey Mary, like your brain is just like really going. You're not like your feet aren't on the ground.
Yeah.
So looking for that. Facebook's been a pretty good place. Reddit's okay. It's a little more anonymous. Sometimes a little bit more open.
Yeah.
And people, I don't know, I'm not afraid anymore to send someone a DM on any platform. Like I used to feel like, oh, I have to
Yeah.
know this person to send them a DM. Send somebody a DM. If they don't respond, odds are either like they didn't see it because social media is tricky sometimes. Maybe they didn't have enough spoons to respond, or whatever, but like just keep trying. Send somebody else a
Yeah.
DM that you see, because the more and more that I've interacted and engaged with people online, the more that I've realized that like this is where, okay, so you had bars, right? And libraries, and you have all these different places where people meet, but this is where disabled people are meeting,
Yeah.
and people who are adjacent to disability. This is our club, is the internet. And as much as I can be found multiple days saying, "Oh my gosh, the internet's awful. It's ruining the world. Chat GPT, whatever." No, like they're
Yeah.
still good there, and I'm not gonna let a couple billionaires take that away from me. That there's
Yeah.
some good stuff on the internet, and I think that whether people actually realize it or not, a lot of us are just looking to find each other by sharing the
Yeah.
content.
Oh, I totally agree. And I tell people a lot with like support groups and stuff, or just friendships, that everyone should just go into it like dating. Like I don't know, when you go to date someone, like, yeah, you put yourself out there and you're like, introducing yourself to people. Maybe you go on a couple dates and you're like, I don't know, this really isn't working out, and it fizzles out. Or maybe it goes a little bit more and then you have an argument and then you see if it's going to keep going. Like
Hmm.
there are so many parts to relationships. And I feel like I mean, growing up, it's like, everyone's always focused on like, oh, do you have a crush? Do you have this or whatever? Where it's like you become an adult and then all of a sudden people are like, how do I make friends again?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially when you go through something in your life that like kind of separate, like your identity shifts, and then all those friends that you connected with, you don't seem to be connecting with a lot. And
Yeah.
I mean, that could be a load of things. I mean, I know like having children and trying to stay friends with people who don't have kids, like identifying as someone with a disability or LGBTQ or, anything when it's going to like change your identity and the way that you're like experiencing the world, it could be really hard when, the group of people that you had, you're just like not connecting with anymore. And then I feel like people really struggle finding that next group. But I do feel like the internet just has so many groups. Like there, but it is, when you were explaining, the first like Facebook group you found, it just made me think of like how clear your own personal boundaries have to be. Like,
Yes.
okay, I'm gonna go into this group like, oh, you're talking about like a bath that's gonna cure my child's autism. Like, okay, well, maybe that's not the group for me. Like, where is like your like turning point of like, or where's that boundary of like, no, that's
Right.
like I need a different space right now to like
And
emotionally
and if
support myself.
And if for some reason that was what drew you to the space initially, like don't feel bad about it, right? Like we all grow, we all learn, and we're all changing, and we're different people every day.
Yeah.
Because I know there are a couple people that I've been friends with that were like, I joined these groups and we were like doing the inspiration porn, and like I'm like, it's okay, it's okay. Like that was what you did before. You found a group, you found some
Yeah.
people, but things changed. You can move on from the group. You can move to something else.
And you
Um,
learn from it. I mean,
yeah.
I used to love the word differently abled because I thought that was like the most, I thought it was the most inclusive thing ever. And within the year, I feel like I saw so many disabled advocates being like, that word sucks, don't use it. And I was like, okay,
And some people
great.
say it's
Like,
okay, and some people don't. And that's, yeah, it's that personal boundary of like, what are you comfortable with and what are you looking for? And it's so hard to make friends. And I use my son and his friends to make friends, because parenting is something that really does change your life.
yeah,
And I think that it's really easy when you are adjacent to a disabled child to put yourself in this bubble that like I can't, like normal parents can't relate, right? Um, and I don't think we give them enough credit, right? So there are spectrums of people. There are good people, there are bad people, there are people in between. There
mhm,
are people who are open-minded and willing and closed-minded and in between. And when you find a good person that's good for you, good is not, a morally good or bad term, but like somebody who's good
yeah,
for you, it's your person. It doesn't matter if they are just like you. It just matters that they're right for you. So my favorite types of friends, my favorite types of support are the people that like we can not talk to each other for 5 years,
yeah,
you know, and then we send each other a meme and oh my gosh, nothing's changed. How are you? What do you need anything? Like not, there's no pressure, no demands, nothing has changed. Life carries on. And sometimes I think it's easier for me to find those people in a space where there are other disabled individuals just because I feel like they get it.
yeah,
But when I really have started making friends with my son's friends' parents, I've realized that like I'm not giving other people enough credit for just being there for a specific type of need that I have. It is the perfectionist mindset now that I'm thinking about it. We're
yeah,
going back to this again, where it's like we don't have to have someone who meets all of our needs, right?
yeah,
Sometimes just having a listening ear, like, oh my gosh, parenting was so hard. Parenting is hard. Even if you have a disabled child, even if your child is able-bodied, parenting is hard. And parenting a disabled child can be just like parenting an able-bodied child. We run into the same problems, we run into the same frustrations. I think that at the root of it, we're all just exhausted trying our best, right? And if you
Yeah.
find somebody who just gets that you're exhausted trying your best and you need some support, that might be the best support.
Yeah.
It's just it's the people that you might not have initially thought of or
Yes.
went to seek out.
And I do feel like having an open mind, you said that earlier. I feel like that's yeah, because I do I've described to myself a lot as like a extreme extrovert is how I describe myself. And like I've had friends tell me because like they'll talk about a friend that's just like being kind of rude or like not really listening to their boundaries or not really like feeling respectful in my opinion. And I'm like, I don't know, I just probably wouldn't be friends with them anymore. Like that sounds like no, that sounds pretty mean. And they've responded with like, well, like I don't have like that. I don't have that many friends that I could just like say no to this. And I was like, that's interesting, but that's still like to me, I was like, well, then go make more friends. Like go put yourself out there somewhere else. Like you don't have to stay in this relationship because you've already spent years being friends with them. Because like they're just like it. I don't want to compare it to like an abusive relationship, but it's just like not like it's just not being mutual. Or it's not being like
When someone's taking more spoons than you have to give,
yeah.
it's not
I
worth it.
Yeah, and so and I think kind of goes back to like people are just it's hard to like be vulnerable and go out there and make new friends, but I mean I think I've also tried to just explain like a lot of the friends that I make like I didn't know I was gonna like them at the beginning. Like I just like to talk to people and like to get to know people, and then usually I end up we connect somewhere and yeah, I wish more people. But I don't know where that sentence was going. I was thinking about COVID, where I feel like people, we all kind of bunkered down, and the transition of coming back out, I feel like has been really hard. That, a lot of us are working from home now. We're working virtually. We're having these great relationships online, and we're kind of forgetting um, how to make that effort of like seeing people in person and making those connections and just like being vulnerable, like stepping out of your own comfort zone, your own little bubble, um, to meet people, which I kind of feel like we're starting to get there again. And I kind of feel like the last couple of worldly disasters we've had have like shown the community getting back out there. If we're going to take any pro from these horrible tragedies that are happening, I do like like how Airbnb is like, giving like if you need places to stay, like we have free places to stay and restaurants who are like if you like, if you need food, come here and get food and all of the companies that have stepped forward and all the people that I've been seeing on social media that are like we're looking for these clothes, who can give them? Like
Mhm.
it it is comforting to know that like we are still a community. Like there are still people who want to help and are there trying to help.
Yeah, the helpers are always
Yeah.
going to be there, and I think that's something that people forget. And it is really easy, like doom scrolling, to forget about that. But it does feel heartwarming in moments like this to be able to look and see that, even like I think it was Baby Lato is a brand of cribs. If your crib's been destroyed, we'll send you a new crib. You know, it, it does bring that kind of like good feeling again, but it's something to keep in mind that when big things like this happen, we have to step back and think about like minute to minute, hour to hour, right? So like
Yeah.
if we're focusing on how are we going to be able to have, 72 hours worth of food and all this stuff, well, the food might be there. You might be surprised. The food might be there, but you might not be there.
Yeah.
And what can we do to just like stay grounded, because these communities are coming back, they're resurging, and it's great to have online communities, it's great to have people in person, Here in Michigan, there's a lot of places that have been taking clothing. Like we're going through our closets right now and donating clothing because people need clothes.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, a lot of people in their disaster planning, you're like, how do I have enough clothing? Well, there's like, I don't even know what the statistic is, but I think it's like enough clothing for the next like 3 generations already exists on our planet right now because we've overconsumed. Like the clothing
Yes.
will be there. It might not
Hmm.
be perfect. Um, it might not be the most comfortable, most favorite clothing, but you are the most precious thing that you own, you have as yourself. And it's really easy to get caught up in like wanting everything to stay the same. But the helpers will be there. We can't rely on them for everything. We have to take care of ourselves, but some of these big things will find a way. Airbnb. One thing that I was thinking about recently too was with holidays and birthdays and things coming up, people should, if you're comfortable asking friends and family, like maybe you don't want a present this year, but maybe you want them to have something tucked away for you. Like, can you keep, if you're going to get me a $50 gift card, can you just keep the $50? And if I need help with a hotel room, if I have to evacuate, or if I need help with food because of a disaster, like having family that's willing to help, or friends that are willing to help, or willing to contribute to an emergency fund for you, might be ways to just feel a little bit more connected, but also a little bit more prepared
Yeah.
from a space of privilege.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I love that you talk about like the privileges that some people have versus some people that don't. And I feel like that definitely plays a part with well, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Uh so do you have any more last second tips?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, dude, we just
Yes, I
went
do.
through like the first three. I have a whole packet ready to go.
Okay, yeah, I do.
So go.
Actually,
Last second tips.
so
And then we are going to do our Mystic Cats tarot card reading.
yeah. So my last second tip, I was talking to my mom yesterday about this podcast. I was like, I'm going to be on a podcast, and she's a really great listener. She lets me kind of bounce ideas off of her, and she liked this idea. So we all have a lot of documents, right?
Oh my gosh, we didn't talk anything about. I had
We
this
don't.
written down. Okay,
Oh
go.
my gosh. I know
Document.
this is why I was like, I need to start an account with information because I could probably sit here for 3 days straight, caffeinated, and just give you like info dump. Okay, so we all have a lot of documents, and I am hyper aware of things because I recently moved. Anyone who's recently moved knows that your documents are probably stored in really strange places, and you have to suddenly be responsible for all these things
Yeah.
and transport them. And while you're moving, you need them. That's what the worst part. You can't just pack them away. So we have things like IDs. Little plug here. If you have children and you are able to get a state ID for them and you have the
Mm.
resources, get them now. My children have IDs. It just keeps their picture in the system, but also gives them some form of this is where I live,
Yeah.
So IDs, passports, birth certificates, naturalization certificates. Oh my gosh, marriage certificates. If you're married and you've changed your name, or any sort of name change or gender affirming changes that have been done to documents, it's a lot. Right? It's
Yeah.
overwhelming. And I was kind of talking to my mom last night about there's this delicate balance of being aware of security, information security, data security, and also being prepared, right? So you wouldn't post a picture of your ID to Facebook. And most people might be a little like apprehensive about taking a picture of it and keeping it on their phone or their social security card. But there's a hidden feature on iOS where you can like hide pictures and you can use your Face
Face
ID
ID.
element,
Yeah.
and it's just in there. I started when we were moving taking pictures of everything. Like 10 year ago, me would have been like, oh my gosh, data breach. Okay, how many data breaches have I been in with my chart? Okay, like if
Yeah.
they want my information, it's somewhere on the dark web, guys. It's there. Everything's there. Like nothing is sacred anymore, I feel like. But
Yeah.
it is, but it's not. So finding that personal comfort zone, assessing risks of what documents am I bad if I lose them, but also like I don't want to have this information out for the world. So I've started taking pictures of everything and saving it in that folder because at the end of the day, the physical document is the best, but having a representation of that document can help you, especially if you're trying to prove residency, enroll for a school district, all these crazy things that could be part of like your normal
Yeah.
day. Take pictures, save them, take pictures of your medications, the prescriptions, screenshot your diagnosis list on your My Chart, save it. Anything that could be helpful, save it on your phone because I feel like these little devices have
Yeah.
become like our entire world. And there's more computing power in this than what took us to the moon, right? So let's use it for something. So take pictures of what you are comfortable with because it is a risk, just
Yeah.
like anything. I think existing is a risk at this point, but take pictures of what you're comfortable with and save it on there because if for some reason I just keep thinking about these families that like they didn't take anything. They just left in
Yeah.
LA, right? But what did they take with them? Their phone. I can guarantee you there's not somebody that left their phone behind. And if they did, they were probably like an older boomer who doesn't keep their phone on them because
Yeah.
we're all stuck. My kid takes his iPad everywhere. We could put information, the little like
Yeah.
SOS is filled out on his iPad, the emergency contact information for us. So document as much as you can. Take pictures of your home, I think, is even what I've seen people say of like what's in your house for insurance claims. But for purposes of just self preservation, take pictures of prescriptions and vital documents and anything that could be helpful because you just never know. Like if I
Yeah.
had to leave the house for an hour and it turned into 3 days and I needed to go pick up a prescription, I would at least have the information for the provider and I could call the provider, find a CVS and see if I can get a new one sent over.
Yeah.
If my house burned down, at least I would have a picture of my husband's naturalization certificate, right?
Yeah.
Something would be there.
And we actually, right before we moved, we bought like well, it was like advertised as like a fireproof filing holder. I mean, I'm not quite sure how fireproof it is, but it holds all of our like important documents and I mean, it's like put somewhere, but it's very easy to get. So when we were moving, we knew that we needed like paperwork for us. And so um, all of that paperwork was there, even though we have a lot of pictures on our phones and that I think that really only started because COVID and like having a vaccination card and traveling with little kids. We needed like proof of their birth certificates sometimes. We needed proof of like vaccination. And so it was so nice when they would let us also use our phones because I don't know, papers are so hard to keep hold of sometimes. But it was really nice to have this like holdable fold thing with all of our paperwork that sits with all of our other files. Like we have a filing cabinet, but that most important paperwork that holds all of our stuff. And whenever we do need it, I mean, it's there. Like we can, it's like, oh, let's go get our passports out. Like, we need our marriage certificate for whatever thing.
Oh, you
Yeah.
just everything in moderation, everything with balance. I feel like 5 years ago I would have screamed at myself saying this advice on the internet. I have a lot of therapy to thank for that, a lot
Yeah.
of therapy, but
Therapy's the best. I highly
you,
recommend.
you just have to find balance isn't this perfect thing. You just have to find what is like the equilibrium that you can live in. Where what space can you live in and be okay?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. This could be like you just ask a question, like kind of like an open-ended question. Or it could just be like, a card that could just like represent where you are right now,
I
really
like
whatever you want it to be.
a card that represents right now. I like that. Let's try that.
Okay. So let me know when you want me to stop shuffling, when you're feeling it in your bones.
Now.
Beautiful. Okay. Oh, that's such a cute one. The sun. Oh my gosh. The little orange cat. The sun. Okay. So it was upside down for you, right? I feel
Yeah.
like I handed it to you. No, yeah. Okay. So, okay. So reversed, it's supposed to be like someone explained to me that reversed isn't negative. It's supposed to be like a more I don't know, like a thorough, like reflection, like on yourself kind of thing. Um, Anyways, but the words underneath the reverse say sadness and unrealistic expectations. So I'm sorry that that was not as
But
positive, but usually the
but
next part
honestly,
is.
that was this podcast
That
is
kind of was.
the unrealistic expectations that we put on ourselves. I'll take that.
That actually,
There's a lot of sadness right now. There's a lot of sad feelings, and there's a lot of unrealistic expectations that we're putting on ourselves. We're putting shoulds. I should be prepared. I should have
yeah,
everything ready for 72 hours, this magic number. I want you to know that magic number is probably a little bit rooted in science, right? But the reason why they're giving you definitive numbers and things like that is because it makes you feel confident and comfortable. Okay?
yeah.
Like
No,
like it's
that
just
makes
an
perfect
arbitrary
sense.
number, right? Um yeah, no, that makes that that was a good card because
That was. There's more
the
to it though.
expectations. Okay, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it says, this gal has found the coveted sunny spot. She is happy to lay in the warmth of the light. You have everything you need and can be optimistic for the future. This bright and sunny energy is yours to carry onward.
That's the podcast description right there, the episode.
That's it.
Find find your sunny spot and sit in it
That
because
was pretty perfect.
because there's always something more out there. There's always something more that you can do. But if you don't make a small step in the right direction and there's no compass that's going to tell you, everybody's different. If you don't make a small step in a direction, you're going nowhere.
Yeah.
I want to be that cat basking in the sun.
Heck yeah. And you are. And I really feel like this podcast is going to be really beneficial to a lot of people because I know I feel like a lot of people are feeling the same way that we are and doom scrolling and just
Yeah.
like overwhelmed and exhausted. And so I think you gave so many great tips that are going to be really helpful to a lot of people. So, last thing is, where can people find you if they do want to contact you?
Okay. So on Instagram, my personal account is a spoon full of salt, not a spoonful. Like think of a spoon that is full of salt. ASPOONFU, two L's, LL of salt. But I'm also starting up a page called Ready Set Disabled, and that'll be on Instagram. And it's ready dot set dot. Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Let me make sure I'm getting this right because I just set it up yesterday. Okay. Don't get too confident here. Okay. So I am setting up an account on Instagram called Ready Set Disability. So it's ready.set.disability on Instagram. And right now there's nothing there, but I have lots of things to populate. Um, and yeah.
That's great. I'll put all those in the show notes too. So if people look back, they can like click through and save it and find you. I feel like you have a lot of knowledge on this, and I think it's going to be really helpful to a lot of people. So thank you so much for um, just volunteering your time so late
Thank
at night.
you. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this podcast. And remember to check out the show notes to follow Mer on her new Instagram handle, where she will be providing more resources for any families that, need to start making those little steps forward. Inclusion starts with you, and I just want to help.